Thank you to President Tom Ross for his welcome and his support of the Appalachian Energy Summit, and thank you all for being here for this very special evening. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s reputation as a resolute defender of the environment stems from a litany of successful legal actions. Kennedy was named one of Time Magazine's Heroes for the Planet for his success in helping Riverkeeper lead the fight to restore the Hudson River. The group's achievement helped spawn more than 160 waterkeeper organizations across the globe. Kennedy serves as president of Waterkeeper Alliance, senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council, chief prosecuting attorney for the Hudson Riverkeeper. He is a partner of the clean tech investment team of Silicon Valley's Vantage Point Capital Ventures, and is the environmental advisor to Napo Pharmaceuticals and co-host of radio show Ring of Fire. He is also a professor of environmental law at Pace University School of Law and serves as co-director of the school's environmental litigation clinic. Earlier in his career, he served as assistant district attorney in New York City. Kennedy was also featured in the acclaimed environmental documentary, The Last Mountain, the Sundance 2011 official selection. The film examines the struggle to save Coal River Mountain in Coal River Valley, West Virginia, the last mountain in the area untouched by the mining practice of mountaintop removal. Among his published books are the New York Times bestseller Crimes Against Nature, 2004, The Riverkeepers, 1997, and Judge Frank M. Johnson, Jr., a biography, 1977. His articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, Rolling Stone, Atlantic Monthly, Esquire, The Nation, Outside Magazine, The Village Voice, and many other publications. Kennedy's award-winning articles have been included in anthologies of America's Best Crime Writing, Best Political Writing, and Best Science Writing. Kennedy is a licensed master falconer, and as often as possible, he pursues a lifelong enthusiasm for whitewater paddling. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
This thing works. Can you hear me? I want to thank the Chancellor, and I want to thank the university for having me back here in Boone. I spoke here, I think, last time about 10 years ago. I come to here often for the Catawba Riverkeeper, for the new Riverkeeper, and for some of the other keepers of our 14 keepers in North Carolina. And I have a lot of friends here, including Elizabeth, who's here tonight, who was the former Catawba Riverkeeper, and also Fred Standback and Alice Standback has been great supporters of ours, and are also supporters of this university. I'm really happy to be here with Amory Lovins because he's been my hero for 30 years, that I've been an environmental advocate, and he was one of my mentors in this area. And I think both of us want to talk about something that about a subject that's been central to our work over the past 3 decades, for me and longer for Amory. Excuse my voice, it should get better as I talk, or at least you'll get used to it. Which is the interplay between capitalism and the environment. And both of us believe that capitalism true free market capitalism is the best answer to environmental injury. And if we had true free market capitalism, that and you had absolute efficiencies, that you wouldn't have pollution. So, and I think both of us are going to talk about that idea, but it's something that I learned first before I met Amory from the Hudson River fishermen, who I went to work for in 1984, and I have been representing ever since, and who turned their organization to the first Riverkeeper. We have in the Hudson, one of the oldest commercial fisheries in North America. It's 350 years old. Many of the people I represent come from families that have been fishing the river continuously for 3 centuries, since Dutch colonial times. And these are capitalists, and they saw their industry, which had a functioning, sustainable business model, it's a sustainable gear fishery for 3.5 centuries. They saw it destroyed not because there was something wrong with their business model, but because there was somebody, the General Electric Company, that had more political clout. And that was able to pull the gears of our political system to get them to allow themselves to do something that was illegal, which was to dump their pollutants into the Hudson River. And they put all the fishermen, 2,000 fishermen, fishing families out of work during the time that I worked with, closely day to day with the fishermen on the Hudson. So most of these men and women wanted to believe that their children would be able to do the same thing that their grandparents and great-grandparents would do, which was to make a living fishing the Hudson. But today, those kids are hanging sheetrock, or they're pouring asphalt, or they're doing something else because General Electric essentially subverted democracy in order to escape the discipline of the free market and make a profit for itself and to privatize the commons. And that's what essentially all pollution is. It's an act of theft. And it's a big shot who can organize subsidies for themselves by subverting the political process and cheap free market capitalism. So one of the things that I learned from the fishermen was this idea that we're not protecting the environment so much for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're protecting it for our own sake because we recognize that nature is the infrastructure of our communities, and that if we want to meet our obligation as a generation, as a civilization, as a nation, which is to create communities for our children that provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, the shared resources, what we call the commons, or the public trust assets of the commonwealth. Those assets that cannot be reduced to private property ownership, but by their nature are the assets of the whole community, the rivers and waterways and landscapes that connect us to our past, to our history, that provide context to our communities, and that are the source ultimately of our values and our virtues and our character as a people. One of the other things that I learned very early on from the fishermen was that good environmental policy, you hear this mantra today particularly from the Koch brothers and the big polluters and their indentured servants in Washington and in the state capitals. You hear, and their toadies on Fox News and on the right-wing radio. We have to choose between economic prosperity on the one hand and environmental protection on the other. And that is a false choice. In 100% of the situations, good environmental policy is identical to good economic policy. If we want to measure our economy, and this is how we ought to be measuring it, based upon how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs over the generations, over the long term, and how it preserves the value of the assets of our community. If, on the other hand, we want to do what David and Charles Koch want us to do, which is to treat the planet as if it were a business in liquidation and to convert all of our natural resources to cash as quickly as possible and have a few years of pollution-based prosperity, we can generate an instantaneous cash flow and the illusion of a prosperous economy. And we can make a few people billionaires, and we can make a few billionaires even wealthier. But our children are going to pay for our joyride. And they're going to pay for it with denuded landscapes and poor health and huge cleanup costs that are going to amplify over time and that they will never be able to pay. Environmental injury is deficit spending. It's a way of loading the cost of our generation's prosperity onto the backs of our children. And one of the things that I've done over the past 3 decades as an environmental advocate is to constantly go around and confront this argument that an investment in our environment is a diminishment of our nation's wealth. It doesn't diminish our wealth. It's an investment in infrastructure. The same as investing in telecommunications or road construction. It's an investment we have to make if we're going to ensure the economic vitality of our generation and future generations. And You know, the big question, the big economic and environmental questions are always, almost always revolve around how we use energy. And you can't read the papers without seeing that issue on the front page virtually every day, whether it's the XL pipeline or whether it's the Santa Barbara oil spill or the Gulf oil spill or the wars in the Middle East or Fukushima, or, you know, all of these issues are tied in, or the extreme weather, etc. These issues are tied into how we use energy. And the question that confronts us today as we try to plan a future for our country is there a way to use energy, to extract it, to treat it, or to distribute it, to transport it, to utilize it? Is there a way to do all of those things that doesn't compromise our aspiration, the aspiration of our children, that doesn't diminish our quality of life, that doesn't subvert our values as a nation, that doesn't send us to wars and pollute us and poison our children and do all these other things? Is there a way to do that? And my answer to that is a resounding yes. About 4 years ago, where David Putnam gave a speech before Parliament, when Parliament was debating a cap-and-trade system that was very much like the one that we passed on Capitol Hill, the Waxman-Markey bill during Obama's first year, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of his energy policy. And this isn't a radical idea. It was an idea that was created by the Heritage Foundation, which was, how do we impose free market discipline onto the disposal of carbon into the global commons, which is extracting a cost from the rest of us? How do we stop people from dumping their garbage into our commons, but to do it in a way that is transitional, that's incremental, and that won't be disruptive to the economy? And this was a brilliant way of doing it, which is to place a price on it and escalate that price annually by reducing the number of credits annually. And what would this do? It would encourage entrepreneurs and business people and scientists and investors to invest in technologies that allowed you to do the same thing, produce the same products, but using less carbon. And it would develop industries and jobs and do all these wonderful things. And Britain, to its credit, passed the bill. You know, it was killed by the Koch brothers in the United States Senate and our country. During the debate in Parliament, there were people, you know, everybody in England essentially believes in global warming. They have been subjected to a $200 million propaganda campaign, as we have in this country, so the public accepts it. But and they understand it, they see it as a grim reality that government has to take a firm hand in addressing. There are still vested interests in others who say, well, we have to move incrementally. We have to move slowly, because if we move precipitously, it's going to cause grave dislocations in the markets, and that is going to injure people, and it's going to impede our capacity to address this and other issues. And Lord Putnam, who's one of the great progressive voices on the planet, he's also a great filmmaker. He made Chariots of Fire and a bunch of other films, and he's a member of Parliament. But he was addressing the concerns of that cohort. And he reminded Parliament that 200 years before, the same body had debated the abolition of slavery. At that time in England, everybody wanted to see slavery abolished. They saw it as a moral catastrophe, as a taint on Britain's claim to be a moral authority, etc., that justified, you know, the empire. So they wanted to see it abolished, but the question was, how do you do it? Because slavery represented 25% of the GNP of Great Britain. It was the principal source of energy for the entire British Empire, free human labor. And they said, if we abolish it outright, the economy is going to crater. But after a year of debate, Parliament made the moral choice and abolished slavery literally overnight. And instead of collapsing, the British economy exploded as thousands of entrepreneurs rushed into that space to create new forms of energy, mainly mechanical ones, in an era that we now know as the Industrial Revolution, which was the greatest epic in wealth creation in the history of mankind. And the abolition of the slave trade had exposed all of these hidden inefficiencies that were associated with free human bondage. Well, today, we don't need to abolish carbon to understand that our deadly addiction to it is the principal drag on American capitalism. Until a year and a half ago, we were importing $1 billion of oil a day. We were borrowing $1 billion, mainly from the Chinese or other nations that don't really share our values, and to import $1 billion of oil a day. Again, largely from nations that don't share our values. We were, in essence, funding both sides of the war against terror through our addiction to oil. And that export of $750 billion annually, $750 billion, plus $300 million that we spend on the military protecting the Gulf, so that's $1 trillion lost money leaving this country every year, $1 trillion, to sustain our addiction to oil. So, and today we're doing, and we were giving, and we continue to give hundreds of billions of dollars every year in subsidies to the oil industry through direct subsidies like the oil depletion allowance and all these loopholes in the federal tax code, but also indirect subsidies like the crop damage, the oil spill cleanup, the discharge of benzene, toluene, xylene, all these poisons, and the healthcare costs that EPA estimates to run about $350 million just from burning oil. Another $345 billion from burning coal. So, and those are all costs that in a true free market would be reflected in the price of the oil when it got to market. We're paying those costs. We're just not paying it at the pump. So they're able to conceal it, and those costs become subsidies to oil. It gives them a market advantage because they don't have to pay the cost of bringing their product to market, and they're able to outcompete much more efficient competitors in the marketplace and conceal the cost of their product to the rest of us. And you see those kind of subsidies with all of the incumbents. You know, nuclear energy probably we spend $500 billion a year on nuclear energy, on subsidy. There's nobody who in the world who will build a nuclear power plant unless it's 100% funded by the taxpayers. There's no utility who will do that. And then the insurance costs, well, you know, they couldn't pay insurance, so we had to pass the Price-Anderson Act that makes their whole industry insured by you. Go home and look at your homeowner's insurance policy. Every homeowner's insurance policy in this country has a provision in it that says this policy does not insure you against radiation contamination from a nuclear power plant. So that is a huge subsidy to the end. Everybody else has to pay insurance for their industry, but not the nuke, because they couldn't survive if they did that. Plus now, you know, our children now are going to have to pay for the disposal of their waste for 30,000 years, which is 5 times the length of recorded human history. So how can it possibly be economic? It's not. How can they compete in the marketplace? By political clout. It gets them subsidies that allows them to compete people with actually feasible business models, like wind and solar. Coal is the most heavily subsidized of all. The coal is the most, you know, they sell coal in this state 2 cents a kilowatt hour at night. So it seems really cheap, but it's actually, if you look at the subsidies, the most catastrophically expensive way to boil a pot of water probably that's ever been devised. You know, I'll just tell you this one story. I spent 30 years suing the coal industry. I won about 5 years ago, I won the biggest judgment in a 6.5-week jury trial in West Virginia. And when we went to argue the appeal, and I was coming back from the appeal with some of my attorney colleagues, and we were in a car driving to the airport. We were driving on a road that was as smooth as this stage. It was like a skateboard park. And this is very unusual in West Virginia. My father, you know, spent a lot of time in West Virginia in the 1960 campaign and then afterward. Used to tell us about West Virginia. It's the richest state in the nation if you look at the coal below the land, but it's got the poorest people after Mississippi. That coal is not enriching the people of the state. It's a colonial economy. The coal is going to Wall Street, the money's going to Wall Street. It's not staying in the state, so the roads in West Virginia are potholed and they're bad. But this road was beautiful. And I said to the driver, why is this road so nice? He said, there's 22 inches of asphalt on this road. Massachusetts Turnpike has 4 inches. The New York State Thruway has 4 to 6 inches. And every inch costs the taxpayer millions of dollars per lane, per mile. So I knew why there were 22 inches on that road, because the coal trucks would weigh 90,000 pounds, and they would pulverize the less robust surface. But they're not paying for that road, you and I are. So that's a subsidy to coal that they don't tell you about when they say, oh, it's only 11 cents a kilowatt hour. It's 2 cents at night, 11 cents during peak. Here in North Carolina, it's the cheapest coal in the country in this state. So, well, when they say it's 11 cents, they're not telling you that out of your other pocket, you're paying for 6,000 miles of coal roads in West Virginia and Kentucky. And you're also paying for all the rails in this country. Railroads, the reason we can't have high-speed rail is because the railroads have all been warped by the coal gondolas, which was 50% of the traffic. Not only that, but 100% of freshwater fish in America is now contaminated with mercury. From coal plants. According to CDC, 1 out of every 6 women has dangerous levels of mercury in her womb. And there's 460,000 babies born in this country every year who've been exposed to levels of mercury in their mother's bodies that will impose at least the loss of 1 IQ point on those children. Those are costs that they don't tell you about when they say it's only 11 cents a kilowatt hour. If you go to EPA's website, you'll see that ozone in particular, another class of pollution from those coal plants, kills 20 to 60,000 Americans every year. Even if it's only 20, it's 4 times or 5 times the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attack, but not just once, year after year after year. The cost of those ozone particulates in lung damage and death, premature deaths, $345 billion a year. So you could pay for all of Obamacare just by forcing the coal plants to comply with the law. Acid rain, which has destroyed the forest cover on the high peaks of the Appalachian from Georgia to northern Quebec, sterilized 1/5 of the lakes in the Adirondacks. Those are other costs that they don't tell you about. And then, of course, mountaintop removal mining, which is the worst atrocity cataclysm. We've, in the last 10 years, according to EPA, we have flattened an area the size of Delaware. And the coal companies were all saying now, we're going to clean them all up. We're going to reclaim all that land and make them mountains again. And now all the coal companies are bankrupt. Peabody and the other 2 major coal companies have already lost over 95% of their value because of competition from more efficient energy sources over the past 2 years. So those companies are highly likely, and investors believe that they're likely to default on their debts. They're never going to clean up Appalachia, which is what we always told them. So those are costs, those are subsidies to inefficient, tired dinosaur injuries, and they're the only things that are keeping those industries alive in the marketplace. Now we know this, that every nation that has decarbonized its economy has experienced extraordinary prosperity almost instantaneously. Iceland in 1970 made a decision to decarbonize its economy. Iceland was then the poorest country in Europe. It was 100% dependent on imported coal and oil. There was a lot of pushback, but the government of Iceland stayed strong, and they actually, today, 95% of the energy grid comes from local geothermal. So Iceland went during that period from being the poorest country in Europe to being the 4th wealthiest country by GDP on Earth. Unfortunately for Iceland, they spent virtually all of their newfound wealth on bundled derivatives, and they once again became the poorest country in Europe. Iceland's economy is recovering far faster, bouncing back far faster than any other nations in Europe, because their fundamentals now are so strong. They don't import, they're now net energy exporters. They can't run lines across the Atlantic because it's too far, but soon they're going to be able to, because Great Britain is putting wind farms in the North Sea, and they're close enough that Iceland's going to be able to run a line to them. And one of my companies is actually bidding or for the job of running the transmission line. And once they do that, they're going to be able to sell directly onto the European grid, and they're going to get very, very wealthy. Right now, what they do is they import bauxite from Jamaica, use the huge surplus of geothermal that they have to smelt the bauxite into aluminum, and they sell the ingots on the world market, and that's their way of exporting energy. Sweden in 1997 decided to decarbonize and incidentally to shut down its nuclear power industry. It closed the two biggest nuke plants, slapped $150 a ton tax on carbon, and Sweden's economy since then has grown by 50% and its energy use has dropped by 10%. Brazil, 20 years ago, decided to decarbonize its transportation grid, and as a result of that choice, and some others, but that choice was really central. Brazil is enjoying the longest, most robust economic expansion in the history of Latin America. Last year, Brazil replaced France as the 7th wealthiest country in the world. Costa Rica, at the same time, decarbonized its electric grid, and Costa Rica made a lot of really good choices. Probably the most important one was to not have an army. Costa Rica, as a result of those choices, today has by far the largest economy. It's the smallest nation, has the largest economy in Central America. Its economy is actually larger than almost all of its neighbors combined. And you could go on and on and on with these examples. But we have in this country much greater geothermal resources than they have in Iceland. My home in Mount Kisco, New York is powered by geothermal. And virtually every home east of the Mississippi could be, and most of the homes west of the Mississippi, except the ones in the major cities, could be. We just don't do it because of the illusion that coal is so cheap. But actually, geothermal is a lot cheaper if you had coal had to pay all of its expenses. We're probably 3rd or 4th in the world in terms of solar. The Scientific American did a study that showed that we could power the entire existing U.S. energy grid from an area 75 miles by 75 miles in the desert Southwest. You wouldn't do that because if if a cloud passed over Arizona, you would black out the entire country. But it's a demonstration of what our potential is and how much is being wasted. We are #1 in the world for wind energy, particularly land-based wind energy. The Midwestern states, the Saudi Arabia of wind, according to the Scientific American report, we could power the entire North American energy grid just from the wind in North Dakota, Texas, and Montana. So we have these extraordinary power sources here. What are the impediments to us actually transitioning to a green energy economy? And as I said, there's 3 major impediments. A 4th, if you regard the most important one, which is the political clout, the Citizens United case, and the political clout of big energy companies, of the incumbents, of the carbon cronies and Newt, to be able to twist the political system and give themselves an infrastructure advantage and a subsidy advantage. So, the first impediment is the subsidies, which give the incumbents an advantage in the marketplace. But even with those huge subsidies, we are still able to beat them. And, I talked at lunch, I did a little talk at lunch that David Crane, who's the head of NRG, which is the biggest energy producer in the country, and David Crane has coal plants, gas plants, nuke plants, and wind and solar, and he even has diesel plants. He's agnostic about what kind of energy he uses. He just wants the cheapest form of energy for his shareholders. But what he says is that in more than half the states, it is now the cheapest form. If he has $100 million to spend on a new power plant, he's going to spend it on solar. So even with an estimated $1 trillion of subsidies every year to oil and about the same amount to coal, it's still cheaper to use solar, which has gone from $5 a watt to 50 cents a watt over the past 7 or 8 years. And it's continuing to drop, and it will continue to drop. So, and those are the subsidies. The second issue is, and this is probably the most difficult one, is we don't have a transmission infrastructure. that can carry these new currents of renewable energy, of variable power. The transmission system that we have is underbuilt, it's overloaded, it's archaic, it's stupid, it's not a smart grid, it can't send electrons 2 ways in the line, it can't do long-haul transmission of electrons, they diffuse in the line after about 300 miles. It can't do the things that we now know how to do, which is when you hit peak, you can go into people's homes and turn off their air conditioners or turn off their dishwashers and then turn them back on at 4 o'clock in the morning or go into your car and borrow energy, buy energy from the stored battery in your car that's plugged in and replace it after the peak has passed and give you money for it. We're able to do all those things technically and technologically, but we're not doing them yet. We have not invested in the grid, and the grid is misaligned. It doesn't reach the big power centers, the wind centers in the Midwest. It doesn't reach the solar centers in the desert Southwest. So we need to do the same kind of project that Eisenhower did when I was a little boy during that administration, when he built a highway system in this country that connected all the American communities to a single unified highway system because of national security reasons and for commercial reasons and for cultural and national consolidation reasons. We need to do the same thing with our energy grid. The third issue, this is one that Amory talks about all, is that we have an irrational regulatory system in this country. We have energy is regulated in the United States by 50 states and 130 control districts. And the rules that govern energy sales are irrational. They encourage waste and they encourage dirty energy. So in North Dakota, well, this is in North Dakota, virtually every farmer in North Dakota wants to put wind farms on their property. Because, why is that? Because a North Dakota cornfield is worth $800. A North Dakota cornfield with a wind turbine on it is worth $3,200 per acre. Wind turbine takes up a very small footprint. But that wind turbine, he can't get, a North Dakota wind farm owner cannot get his electrons to markets in Cleveland, Cincinnati, New York, New Orleans, Columbus, because they will diffuse in the line before they cross the North Dakota border. The rules that govern energy sales are, as I said, irrational. They encourage you to burn as much energy as possible and not do much about conservation. So I had a friend, Jim Rogers, who ran Duke Power for many years, and he had the second biggest coal fleet in the country, most of it in North Carolina. And he wanted to shut down those coal plants because he thought they were causing global warming. They were poisoning his children, poisoning his community. But he couldn't do it because most of them were over 40 years old, some of them over 60 years old. They were completely paid for, and so the only cost was the fuel cost, so they were the cheapest plants to run. So his shareholders, if he shut them down, would sue him. So he kept going to Congress and saying, why don't you pass a law that makes me remove the mercury? Why don't you pass a law that makes me remove the ozone and particulates so I'm not poisoning people? That will drive up the cost of the plant and I'll be able to close it and switch to a different form. But Congress was controlled by the Koch brothers and they wouldn't do it. So we forced people, smart people who really care about the environment, to, like Jim Rogers, to get up every morning and force them to make a choice about whether he's going to spend his day in service to the people of our country and to humanity, or whether he's going to spend it in service to his shareholders, because they're two different, conflicting, contradictory missions. And we should be smart enough to be able to arrange rules for the marketplace that allow people, smart people like Jim Rogers, to make money by doing good things for the rest of us, rather than forcing them to make money by hurting us. And that's what, the free market is the most powerful economic engine ever devised. But it has to be harnessed to a social purpose. Otherwise, it's going to lead us directly down the road of corporate kleptocracy and oligarchy and environmental destruction. So, every market has rules, and you just have to make sure that the rules are rational. And we actually wrote new rules, my group, NRDC, in California in 1982, which rationalized the rules. And we said, you know, now you can make the same amount of money, but doing it through conservation and through investment in renewables. And it wasn't a radical idea. Back before we had deregulation, the way that utilities made money is they would go to the Public Utility Commission and they'd say, I want to build a dam. It's going to cost $100 million. I want 12% annual profits. That's why utilities were always a good bet economically, because they could demand that in advance to be integrated into the rate base, and all they had to do is show a need. The Public Utility Commission would stamp and approve. They build it, integrate their profits in the rate base, and then just generate money. Today, the way the utilities in California make money is Pacific Gas and Electric or Southern California Edison will go to the Public Utility Commission and they'll say, I want to rip the Edison light bulbs out of 1 million homes, replace them with LED light bulbs that use 10% of the power. I want to rip the antiquated appliances out of all those homes and replace them with appliances that use only 25% of the power. The homeowner is not going to have to pay anything. That cost will be integrated into the rate base. It's going to cost $100 million, and I want to make 12% profits on that. And guess what? The investment produces much more megawatts than $100 million in the dam or a new power plant. Amory coined the word megawatts. It's energy you don't use, but you don't use it more efficiently. You spend $100 million and you eliminate the need for twice or 3 times or 10 times the amount of megawatts that you would do by spending $100 million on a coal plant or a dam. So economically it makes sense, and that's why Californians use half the energy that anybody else in this country uses. Californians use 6,000 kilowatt hours a year. I don't know what they use in this state, but it's probably somewhere between 11,000 and 14,000 kilowatt hours. So it's probably about twice what California is, and that means California is in a better position to act efficiently and produce products that are cheaper and more efficient than people in other states because they're using less energy. So what we need to do is to create a unified national grid that is governed by rational rules that encourage good behavior. We need a marketplace, a national marketplace that does what a market is supposed to do, which is to reward good behavior, which is efficiency, and punish bad behavior, which is inefficiency and waste. Right now, we have a marketplace that is governed by rules that were written by the incumbents to reward the dirtiest, filthiest, most poisonous, most destructive, most addictive fuels from hell, rather than the cheap, clean, green, wholesome, and patriotic fuels from heaven. And we need to switch that dynamic around. And, you know, we need a marketplace that turns every American into, and, you know, I have, in addition to those 6 geothermal wells, I have 2 state-of-the-art solar systems on my roof in Mount Kisco. My house is a power plant. It generates more energy virtually every day of the year than it uses. And during the summers when I'm not there, or during vacations when I'm not there, or weekends, all it is a power plant. I ought to be able to sell that energy back onto the grid and make market rates for it, just like the utilities do. Today, there's no state where you can do that. You know, New York lets me sell some of it back. What happens is the utility will roll the meter back in my house till it hits 0. But then they don't start paying me. They ought to start paying me then, don't you think? And then at the end of the month, they start it all over again, so I can't build up a surplus. I can't say, hey, I gave you 1,000 kilowatt hours last year. What happened to them all? They just canceled them. So, and that's not, all of these guys are out there saying we like free market capitalism. The Koch brothers, you know, funded the Cato Institute, a free market group. You know, they're not free markets. They hate free markets. They like free markets if you listen to the seductive words that come from their noises that come from their mouths, but if you look at their feet, they hate free markets. What they want is they want a cushy, you know, sweetheart capitalism for rich polluters and a savage, brutal, merciless I mean, socialism for rich polluters and a savage, merciless capitalism for the rest of us. You know, they don't want free markets. The purpose of all those think tanks, there's now 50 of them in Washington, is to craft the philosophical underpinnings for a system of unsheathed corporate profit-taking and corporate political power. It's nothing to do with free markets. If you want to know who wants free markets, go to the Rocky Mountain Institute. They're talking about true free markets. These guys are talking about corporate crony capitalism and socialism for the rich. So, what we need is this marketplace that will turn every home into a power plant like mine, every American into an energy entrepreneur, and power this country based upon American ingenuity and energy and imagination and hard work, and what Franklin Roosevelt called American industrial genius rather than Saudi Arabian oil or Appalachian coal. We've done this before. We've built national marketplaces and national grids for example, in the internet. We built a national grid called the ARPANET in 1988. And it allowed the internet to penetrate and to get to every American home. Do you know who was responsible for that? Al Gore. He built the internet. Oh, he never said he built the internet. They just said he built the internet, but he actually did build the internet. He wrote the bill that created the ARPANET. So we built the ARPANET in '88. A year after we built the ARPANET, the CEO of IBM said that publicly, that personal computers, PCs, are, quote, a dead-end technology. And a lot of companies made the same bet, like Dell and a bunch of other companies got out of that business back then. But guess what? Most people have personal computers now. Why? Because we built the marketplace. And what happened to the cost of information, of bits and bytes? It plummeted to zero. That's what's going to happen to electrons when we build a national grid for energy. I was in China a few months ago, and one of the companies that I'm involved with has an app. It's like Google, but it's called Cha-Cha, and you dial Cha-Cha 247 on your cell phone. And some of the cell phones have shut it off now. I got to be honest with you, but you can ask any question you wanted, and within 30 seconds it gives the answer. It makes you look at a couple of ads, and then it gives you the answer. Anything. I was saying to these Chinese friends of mine, I said, ask me any question. They said, what was Mao Zedong's favorite lunchtime meal? So I asked it the question, and it comes back 30 seconds later with, spicy ground beef soup with over pork fried rice, something like that. I don't know if it's right, but anyway, that's what it said. But you imagine what that piece of information would cost you to get 5 or 10 years ago? You would have had to hire somebody, fly them to Washington, spend weeks going through the stacks of the Library of Congress and making phone calls to people in China. They'd have to speak Mandarin. You'd have to pay them triple. How much would that cost you? Thousands of dollars to get that piece of information. Today, you get it for free in an instant. And that's because we built a national marketplace. In 1997, we built a national marketplace for telecommunications. Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act and told all the baby bells, you've got to consolidate your lines and create one national grid and the lowest cost, everybody gets on. They used to restrict you. He said everybody gets on the lowest cost provider is going to prevail in the marketplace. And that spawned a telecommunications revolution in this country. And all these technology we have now, like iPads and iPhones and all this other stuff, are the offspring of that revolution. But what happened to the cost of telecommunications? Well, I see these ads for Vonage on TV, which every month it drops, but I saw it 3 days ago in Massachusetts, and it was for unlimited local, overseas, and long-distance calls, $9 a month, right? That's practically free. About 3 years ago, I was in Miami. It was the last big charge I had on a long-distance call, but I made a long-distance call to London for 5 minutes, and it cost $75. So that's, people my age, that's what you pay. I mean, at Pace Law School where I teach, the law school, the university, only had one professor who was allowed to make overseas calls. He's the only one who had the mechanism in his office, and we all had to go, if we wanted to make an overseas call, we had to go up to Dr. Visa's office and, ask him, can I use your phone? So, but now it's free, and think about how that changes everything, communication and everything else, but it's virtually free. $9, and my kids would not even pay $9 a month. They have stuff that they do. They make them free. And that's what's going to happen to energy as soon as we build a national grid for electricity in this country. You're going to see that same kind of plunge. I'll tell you why that's going to work. And I talked a little bit about this at lunch, we're building a solar thermal plant, which was going to be the biggest 3.2 gigawatts in the Mojave Desert, and now going to be quite smaller because the economics have changed. But it cost us the equivalent of $3 billion a gigawatt to build the first stage of those plants, the first 2 or 3 plants. $3 billion a gigawatt. So to build a coal plant is $3 billion a gigawatt. To build a nuke plant is $15 billion a gigawatt. To build an oil plant, $3 billion a gigawatt. Well, once you build our plant, and now a gigawatt of the solar, the rooftop or PV solar, which is what the utilities are using, is down to about 2.86 a gigawatt. So it's cheaper than building a coal or a gas plant. But once you build our plant, it's free energy forever, because the photons are hitting the earth every day for free. All we've got to do is put in the infrastructure to harvest them. Once you build that coal plant, now you've got to go to West Virginia, cut down the Appalachian Mountains, ship them across the country in rail yards, pulverize the roads, warp the rails, burn the coal, poison every fish in America, poison 1 out of every 6 women, kill 60,000 people a year. The costs just start once you build the plant. Once you build our plant, it's free energy forever. Once you build an oil plant, now you got to go over to Saudi Arabia, punch holes in the ground, bring up the oil, refine it expensively, genuflect to the sheiks who despise democracy and are hated by their own people, and in periodic wars that cost $4.3 trillion, ship it across the Atlantic with a military escort that, guess what, Exxon doesn't pay for it, you and I do, and spill it all over the Gulf, spill it all over Valdez, burn the oil, and poison everybody in the country. So the big costs begin after you build the plant. Now, I'll just give you the math really quickly, which is that we use 1,000 gigawatts at peak demand in our country. 500 of those are carbon-based. So to replace those, assuming 2% growth and that a power plant lasts for 50 years, which are both right, you have to double that. So in order to completely decarbonize America, we need about 1,000 gigawatts, let's say roughly. At $3 billion a gigawatt, that's $3 trillion, which is less than the cost of the Iraq war, which OMB says is 4.3. And it's less complicated than going to war in the Mideast. So, I mean, that seems like a good deal to me. And all that money, we get to stop sending money over there, and we get to keep the money here. Not only for energy and the environment, but for education and jobs and healthcare system, and we can make ourselves a model of democracy. It'll be the biggest tax break in the history of mankind, because we're eliminating energy costs all of our businesses. It's the same thing as getting a tax break. So it's going to create prosperity the same as it did in Iceland and Sweden and Costa Rica, and we can do that. We can do that in this country. I think my cell phone died, so I don't know what time it is, but these guys all came up here. I'll say one last thing, which is this. I started out by saying that the answer to environmental problems is free market capitalism. The reason I say that is because in a true free market capitalism, a true free market would promote efficiency. And efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. And a true free market would require us to properly value our natural resources, and it's the undervaluation of those resources that cause us to use them wastefully. In a true free market, you can't make yourself rich without making your neighbors rich and without enriching your community. But what polluters do is they make themselves rich by making everybody else poor. They raise standards of living for themselves by lowering quality of life for everybody else. And they do that by escaping the discipline of the free market. You show me a polluter, I'll show you a subsidy. I'll show you a fat cat using political clout to escape the discipline of the free market and force the public to pay his production costs. That's what all pollution is. And the Pew Foundation just did a report that said, it looked at the best investments in America. It looked at the wool industry, the paper industry, the steel industry, the mining, timber, securities, everything. The #1 return was investing in a political candidate. Oh, that's where you get your biggest return. Why do you think the Koch brothers are spending $900 million on this election? Do you think it's because they love humanity? Do you think it's some patriotic impulse that's driven them? You know. The reason is because they have $65 billion worth of tar sands in Alberta, and they want to get it down here and sell it to China. So if they spend $1 billion getting that, and why do you think Congress, which they bought, and we know this, and looking at the data, and over 90% of the political elections over the past 2 decades, the candidate with the most money won the election. So democracy can be bought. You just give the guy money and he can, 90% of the time, he's going to win. So not always, but 90% of the time, particularly in the smaller elections, congressional, state, the lower you get, the easier it is to buy the election. So why is it that this Congress, which was bought and paid for, the Tea Party is the creation of the Koch brothers, when they got in, why do you think their #1 priority was? Getting the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline, which its owners say is going to create at most 35 jobs. And it's going to raise the price of gasoline in this country for everybody else. Why? Because the price of gasoline in this country is not dictated by world supply. It's dictated by refinery capacity. And that oil from Canada, before it's shipped to China, is going to be in our refineries, which narrows the refinery capacity for the oil that's coming here. So it's going to drive up oil prices for Americans and create 35 jobs. Why is that the #1 priority of the United States Congress? Well, it's because the Koch brothers paid for it. So that's what we're up against. We're up against people who are fixing the game. They know that they've got an economic model that doesn't work, that has no economic justification, but they can subvert the political system. And that's why the Koch brothers today are with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, in every state, trying to end all supports for wind and solar in the state governments. They have fixed it on Capitol Hill so that it is almost impossible to build transmission lines in this country, which is the medium for our energy. And it's very easy to build a pipeline. You just go, build it right through somebody's kitchen, and they can't even object. So, we've built in this country 16,000 miles of pipelines in 12 years, and only 600 miles of transmission, because the Koch brothers fixed the process on Capitol Hill because they want to harden their infrastructure. And those pipelines, when you build them, they have contracts, and they have investors like the pension funds and J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and all these powerhouses who now need to see oil in that line for the next 30 years. So 30 years after any economic justification for their business is gone, they're still going to be able to run it because they built all that hardened infrastructure now. And that's what they're up to. That's why you see these big battles over pipelines. So all of the environmental laws were intended to restore free market capitalism in this country by forcing actors in the marketplace to pay the true cost of bringing their product to market. And what we do as water keepers is we litigate it, we go out into the marketplace and we find the polluters, the cheaters, and we say that we're going to force you to internalize your cost. the same way that you internalize your profits. Because as long as somebody's cheating the marketplace, it distorts the whole market, and none of us gets the advantages, the efficiency, the prosperity, and the democracy that free market capitalism otherwise promises our nation. So I'm going to shut up right now so that you can hear what I'm